This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, dictionary.com, all these competing dictionaries coming out with their words of the year. Dictionary.com's word of the year?
What?
You wouldn't think this is new or particularly controversial, but
Gaslighting? What is it?
If you think that, then you haven't been paying attention to what's happening in culture. Woman. Word of the year.
What?
Woman. Our selection of woman as our 2022 Word of the Year reflects how the intersection of gender identity and language dominates the current cultural conversations and shapes much of our work as a dictionary. More than ever, we're all faced with questions about who gets to identify as a woman or a man or neither. Right. I think, news to dictionary.com, I think Mr. Rogers settled this some time ago.
Boys are boys from the beginning. Girls are girls right from the start. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine.
Next year's word of the year will be fancy. Cambridge Dictionary is updating its definition of woman to the point of dictionary.com that it's much in controversy to include anyone who identifies as a female. Sure, following the lead of the NHL. And this is important because tolerance of such identity, that's not enough. Nancy Pelosi provided great confirmation of what we on this show have long known to be true, that tolerance is a synonym for acceptance, is a synonym for celebration, according to the left. There are no distinctions. So don't speak in the parlance of tolerance anymore. That's simply not good enough.
And I said, tolerance has nothing to do with it. That is a condescending word to us when it comes to our community in San Francisco. This is about respect. This is about taking pride. And it's about time that we do so at the federal level.
Bend the knee. That's what peaceful pluralism is to Nancy Pelosi. You shall bend the knee. You shall jump you shall say how high when I say jump. You shall celebrate what I tell you to celebrate, as they were yesterday celebrating the codification of the redefinition of marriage into federal law.
And did you see who they went live to? Don Lemon? He and his fiance were there reacting to the ceremony.
Probably debating what a woman is. Kevin Stuart is an assistant professor of political science at the University of St. Thomas and founding member of Strong Families of Taylor, as in Taylor, Texas. Professor Stuart, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, the Christmas parade in small-town America, in the small town in which you reside, Taylor, Texas, what's happened?
Well, the Christmas parade was one of the things that actually attracted us to this town when we were looking to see where we would raise our 3 boys. And it's always been a very unifying town gathering. The whole town turns out. It's decorated cars. It's the firefighters. It's floats from local churches. It's exactly what you would think of with this great tradition of Christmas parades. That is until last year, when one of the floats was the local Taylor Pride organization, an LGBTQ organization. And it wasn't so much that they had a float, but what was on the float, because it included 2 drag queens and another person dancing rather suggestively with no shirt. And this is on streets lined with kids.
It's not just for libraries anymore. Is what you're saying. They're moving beyond the libraries. They're taking it to the streets, like the Christmas parade and the Pride parades where you see such things, like in places like God. Chicago. We're very familiar. That's
vulgar.
It all just melds into one big celebration. Anytime we're celebrating anytime we're celebrating anything, necessarily must include celebration of LGBTQ on their terms.
Right. Well, I mean, as you might imagine, some parents objected to this, to the organizers of the parade. And it's important to say the organizers of the parade are a consortium of churches. So it's a private group that organizes the parade. And so for this year's parade, they took steps to specify in the rules that you can't have any floats that contradict traditional Christian teachings or biblical values. And the Pride organization took that to mean that their float with a drag Santa would not be allowed. And so they complained to city officials. And this is where things get really interesting for me as a political scientist, because we're supposed to live in a country that values democratic participation. But what happened next was the opposite of that, because the city workers, instead of letting the city's elected officials have a voice in this, instead of letting the people of Taylor have a voice in this, the city staff themselves took it upon themselves to create a new and second parade specifically for that one group that thought it would be excluded. Now, it's important to say they never actually applied for the parade this year, but they thought for sure they could not do what they did last year. And so the city staff, who have been elected by no one, created a whole new parade so that that group could participate.
So is that parade going to go after the first parade, or how is it going to work?
It's going to be a parade.
That's
fight.
how it works. So they had the traditional Christmas parade of lights.
Yes.
First, and then immediately following it was the city's more generic holiday parade that had actually in the end only a few participants who were not city employees. It had city employees, fire, and police, and then it had the Taylor Pride group, and then just a one or two or three other participants.
Well, were the drag queens on there? Were they scantily clad and dancing?
Oh, there were even more. So there were three. I think the most egregious example, so that we can all tell what we're talking about here, right, is the drag queen whose name was "Sit on Your Face." So, you know.
Yeah. So now, just so we understand the issue isn't, hey, somebody else wants to have a parade, use the public domain, use the public streets. Well, that's all well and good, but as a private group, we get to use the public space on our terms, too, consistent with our freedoms. So it's not you can't have access to the public space. It's our access to the public space per what we want to do does not necessarily need to accommodate your access to the public space at that time and place. That's the whole point of shared public space.
Right. I mean, there's a Taylor Pride event in June, as cities across the country have as well. When that group goes through exactly the process you described, they get a permit, they go through all the same process to use the space, the public space, to demonstrate in the way that they prefer. And then, of course, all of us who are parents are duly warned that This is not a family-friendly environment, that's not a place for kids, and we keep our kids away at that time. But we should not have to keep our kids away from a Christmas parade.
Right. And the other thing that you're raising, and you talk about this in your piece in the Journal, is this, and we saw this on full display during the response to COVID that persists, the deference to expertise and to particularly bureaucratic expertise. And so what you have here is, as you were mentioning, unelected city officials that have a particular philosophy, surprise, surprise, and they're taking it upon themselves to essentially legislate. They're usurping the authority of the elected officials, and the elected officials stand idly by, and we got a problem there.
That's right. So it's important for people who live in suburbs and small towns across the country to understand why this is happening, why they're being pulled left. And the reason is because working in city administration is a profession that people move up in and where they're paid very well. I mean, I learned in this process, for example, even though I'm a political science professor, I was surprised to learn that the salary for our city manager is actually quite high. The total package, the internet informed me the total package is about $185,000 a year, which is very good compensation. It would make him one of the highest salaried people in town. So these are great jobs, and a profession that people move up in. But because the bigger the city, the more likely it is to be progressive. That means people are auditioning when they're working for your small town. They're auditioning not for the job that they currently have, but for the one that they want. And the one that they want is probably more in a city more progressive than your own. And so they're going to be pulled by their profession in that direction. Now, that can be managed as long as there's vigorous democratic accountability, right? Small d democratic accountability to the people of the town.
Well, no, that's a great point about the professionalization of municipal management and what the implications are. It's a great point. So, what the elected officials, where are they? What are they doing?
Well, the council was not consulted on this, and
so then somebody was fired, of course.
Well, that I think remains to be seen. No one has been fired yet, but the council is beginning to get involved in looking at how all of these decisions were made, who made them, why they didn't consult the council, all of these sorts of questions.
Well, would you be okay with an LGBTQA+ float if they didn't have drag queens on it? I mean, why the need to have drag queens on it? Because I thought this was about waving at Santa and celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I don't think there. I think there would have been some perhaps low level rumbling, but I don't think you'd have seen anything near the controversy that we have if there had not been the sort of egregious display of sexuality that we saw last year and then again this year.
Well, just be lucky you don't have a satellite campus of Francis Parker High School out of Chicago in Taylor, Texas yet. Could get worse. He is Kevin Stuart, assistant professor at Poli-Sci, St. Thomas University. And Professor Stuart, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck with the situation down there in Taylor, Texas.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Balance of nature, changing the world one life at a time.
It works. It took a couple of weeks to get used to it. I'm trying to actually get others to try it because I think it's that good. It really does make things more regulated and consistent, and you feel more normal. And I go by results. I'm a results-oriented kind of guy, and the results with this stuff are very good. I mean, I do find that I'm sleeping most of the time, sleeping better. I'm down like 7 pounds, and I'm not doing anything special in terms of dieting. I'm just taking this, and I'm eating somewhat less because I'm not snacking as much as I used to.
As a special holiday offer, get